Part 3 RK equals Project Ascension Wing R&D Complex Location Classified Coruscant. Dr. Solemn hummed a half-remembered lullaby, one of the ways he used to calm his nerves when an experiment didn't go as he expected. There had been a lot of that going on lately, ever since the Jedi went mental and tried their coup. In fact, personally, for Solemn, that whole mess was a priceless opportunity for science. It wasn't until then that he managed to get his hands on Jedi corpses to experiment on to supplement the few Force-sensitive bodies he managed to gather through some less than legal means. The biggest prize he gained from that whole debacle floated in a Bacta tank in front of him. It was the half-destroyed body of a fellow scientist that he knew was in fact a Sith. The recording of her battle against Grandmaster Yoda was something to behold and worth every piece of lost equipment that fell victim of their encounter. For more than a month now, Solemn had his closest assistants busy studying the body. According to everything he and his colleagues knew of human anatomy, that woman should have died when Yoda so inconsiderately turned himself in a living torch. The little troll not only burned himself to ash but wrecked another prime specimen that might very well lead to a breakthrough in Project Ascension. Solemn glowered at the mutilated remains of the Sith woman. There was no brain activity to speak of that could be detected by any of the state-of-the-art sensors focused upon the broken corpse, yet it continued to breathe when it had no business doing so. The third-degree burns, the sheer thermal damage that cooked most of her chest, not to mention the brain trauma. Yet she still lived, somehow. Even healed, if very slowly, something that Bacta accelerated a bit. It was vexing, it was magnificent. This was a chance of a lifetime, one Solemn would not let slip from his grasp. If he could figure out how the Force worked, how to make regular people able to use it, the possibilities would simply be endless. The fame, the power. Vidas grinned. His people already made some progress by studying how the woman's body healed itself, and they were convinced that it could be replicated using Bacta-based infusions. Solemn never noticed a transparent, ghostly figure that stood in front of the tank and glared at him before vanishing. If he did, the scientist might have dismissed it as a trick of the imagination, cut on the stimulants he had been taking lately and went to catch a good night's sleep for once. After all, no sensor, optical or otherwise he had in his possession could have seen Zash's Force ghost unless she allowed it. RK equals Senate Building Coruscant. Darth Sidious stood on top of the Senate building and wondered what to do. He could remember everything now. Which was less helpful than he hoped it would be. There was one failsafe that might help his situation, however it was a long way from Coruscant and the Sith Lord had no idea how to send his spirit there if it was at all possible. Was he damned to haunt the Senate or at least the rest of the planet if it was luckier? Sidious hadn't checked yet. While he was not afraid, of course not, he was a Sith after all. He couldn't help it but feel unsure. He was the most powerful Sith Lord in millennia, yet he died at the blade of the likes of Windu. That shouldn't have happened. He didn't foresee it at all. Sidious, I presume. A familiar voice echoed in his mind a split second before a presence appeared in the Force beside him. Darth Zash. The Sith Lord sighed. The Jedi got you too? In a manner of speaking. The female Sith smiled mischievously and looked at him. Her face wasn't that of the woman who Vale introduced to him not so long ago. Instinctively, Sidious knew that this was how she really looked like. It was nice to have a confirmation to what the ancient records hinted at. This woman knew how to transfer her essence into new bodies. Could that help their current situation? Zash looked around and pouted. This could have gone better. Sidious grimaced in a silent agreement. Being killed by the Jedi, it was simply vexing, and that was before he thought about the failure of the Sith's grand plan. His non-existent blood boiled with the need for vengeance, yet his ability to do anything about his situation. His sheer aggravation fed the dark side without giving him a way to do a thing. Any idea how to improve our current situation, and what do you want for said knowledge? Sidious asked directly. He very briefly considered dancing around the issue, however doing so was beneath both of them. They were Sith, there was no need to act as if they were senators, thank you very much. Oh, I have so many wicked ideas. Zash licked her lips sensually and winked to Sidious. The Dark Lord stared, startled by the implications of her words. They were Sith. This was. He paused and looked Zash's robed form more closely. The infuriating woman smirked knowingly. Flirting? Here and now? Sidious shook his head in disbelief. This woman was supposed to be a Sith from the ancient empire, right? You know, powerful Force-sensitive brats don't just spawn because the Force demands it, Zash said in an irritating sing-song voice. Besides, there are all kinds of fun people like us can get up to besides torturing people and driving Jedi up the wall. She nodded sagely. Zash had to be messing with his head. Right? Sidious watched his fellow Sith warily. This was not how he imagined a heart-to-heart conversation with either her or Vale going. Concentrate, please. We're both intangible. He waved at his transparent form. Well, that can be a party stopper, Zash agreed. Let's see. She closed her eyes and Sidious felt a pulse go through the Force. It was like a beacon, yet if he wasn't right in front of the woman and looking for any sight of underhanded actions, he could have easily missed it. It won't be long now, she declared after opening her eyes, which sparkled with mischief and giving him a wide, pleased smile. What did you do? Sidious sighed. On the inside he wondered how Vale hadn't gone barking insane with this woman as a master. Or perhaps he was totally and irrevocably crazy, that would explain a lot. We can't have a proper council or even conspiracy if it's just the two of us. The Force trembled and a third ghostly form materialized, right behind Zash. It was Vale, wearing black armored robes, which wasn't out of the ordinary. What stood out was his age. He no longer looked in his 30s but instead was an old man about Sidious' own age, even if he looked a bit better kept, the bastard. Zash, you have the irritating habit of calling when I'm trying to catch on some shut-eye. The third Sith Lord grumbled. He glances towards the former Chancellor and nodded. Sidious. Vale looked around too and raised a graying eyebrow. This is going to be a fascinating story, isn't it? We're in a bit of a bind. Zash waved between herself and Sidious. That's what happens when you get killed and make my life more complicated. Vale deadpanned. Why is your disembodied state my problem? That was a very good question. As they were, neither Zash nor Sidious could cause too much of a bother for the sole remaining Sith at large, if one didn't count that traitor Dooku. Why should he help them? Sidious certainly wouldn't if the situation was reversed. That simply wasn't the Sith thing to do. I can think of all kinds of reasons, my dear apprentice. Zash crooned happily, thus earning herself a pair of wary looks. Is she this way all the time? Sidious asked. Not at all, Vale declared, and for a moment Sidious felt a profound sense of relief. Usually she's much, much worse. Both statements rang true through the Force. Damn it. Zash raised a delicate gloved hand and extended her index finger. 1. You want to change what a Sith means. No apprentice murdering their master and vice versa unless one of them is a fool who needs killing. What? Sidious stared at Vale. That went contrary to the Sith philosophy. As you know, I'm on board with that plan, apprentice, Zash chuckled huskily, a sound that caused Sidious to feel a pang of emotion that he had half forgotten a long time ago. Ever since I stopped trying to possess your body anyway. The crazy woman added. If that was true, Vale hadn't murdered her because? Were both of them simply insane, or were the authentic records of the ancient Sith he possessed wrong? That's why I cheerfully gave you Kira's body. It's not my problem you went and get yourself killed, my former master. Vale shot back. 2. She ignored him. There are all kinds of fun things to research that you don't have the time to deal with. Like what's wrong with the Force? Sidious glared flatly at the woman. There was nothing wrong with the Force. If that was the case he would know, surely. There's that, Vale agreed, making Sidious' head snap in his direction. What about him? The ancient Sith Lord nodded in his direction. There's just the two of us and your lazy apprentice. Zash smirked. Just think how much faster we can get a proper Sith Order and Empire running with him on board. That was a great idea, and the moment it became practical. Really? Vale scowled. Zash glanced at Sidious and frowned. He looks kinda old-fashioned, I admit. All those stab-in-the-back ideas running around his head. A moment later Zash perked up. I can fix him. Now it was Sidious' turn to scowl. There's nothing wrong with me. Who made those two Sith anyway? You still haven't told me why I should create another headache for myself? I already have a bunch of dark Jedi time bombs to babysit. Sidious glared balefully at Vale at the sheer audacity of comparing him to dark Jedi. He was sorely tempted to lash at both of those Sith with lighting, however he was pretty sure that nothing would happen and the last thing he needed was to make a fool of himself. The situation was demeaning enough as it was. You've been busy, apprentice. Zash cheered gleefully. Not helping your case. Like at all. Vale grumbled. I know he isn't Barras, however, before you got yourself sent to the future, the three of us did great work, you have to admit it. Zash tried again. Sidious' scowl deepened. From what little credible information survived about Darth Barras, he was more successful than that particular mummy. I know I'm going to regret this, Vale sighed. State your case, mastermind. Make it good. He rubbed his forehead. Sidious was certainly curious how Zash would persuade her former apprentice that he should help them get new bodies. Naturally, he would make any promises, guarantees and deals necessary to stop being a damn useless ghost, and once that became a reality. RK equals Part 4 RK equals Senate Building, Coruscant. I do have a way to build you new bodies, however there are going to be logistical difficulties. Vale explained. He looked thoughtfully at the pair of Force ghosts. Do explain, apprentice. Zash inquired in a sweet innocent voice that no Sith should be ever able to imitate even remotely. Watching those two interact, Sidious couldn't decide if Darth Bane's rule of two was the best idea that a Sith ever had or one of the biggest mistake one of their kind ever made. The dead Sith Lord had no doubt that Zash and Vale were unhinged, there was no other explanation. Yet, at the same time their unique brand of madness wasn't the one that the Sith usually had to fear. While observing them, Sidious couldn't help but feel that there was something lacking in the teachings he followed. He found himself wishful, eager for something missing, that he simply couldn't put into words. Well, I do have a few dark Jedi that should be disposed of before they become more trouble than they are worth. One Jedi Master too, as long as any of you want to possess a sentient bunch of tree branches, Vale continued to speak. Getting you to the machine and ensuring there are no accidents, that might be harder. Can any of you leave the planet for good, not just using projection? Sidious loathed to admit that the best he could do at this time was pass through walls and float up and down the nearby floors, if he concentrated right and was very careful. Not at this time, Zash said. Kira's body is in Solemn's custody and he's busy scanning it and experimenting to unlock the secrets of the Force, the cheeky bugger. She snorted. As if an ordinary scientist could pull it off, when both Jedi and Sith had spent millennia trying and more often than not failing. Well, we all know who you'll be experimenting on next, just try not to get into the news, Vale chuckled. Zash gave them both a disturbingly innocent look that convinced Sidious that his abilities with the Force mask skill weren't as good as he believed them to be. Even when using it as well as he could, Palpatine could never display such a believable act of innocence. He was a Sith, knew Zash was one too, yet the way she acted, she had him half convinced that her innocent girl act was truth. That by itself had him re-evaluate her threat assessment way up. Besides, while Yoda did take her down, she at least was somewhat alive, something that he couldn't claim. It was hard for Sidious to keep a polite smile on instead of the baleful glare he wanted to level at the woman. There's always the old-fashioned way. Zash trailed off and batted her eyelashes at Vale. Still eager to get into me, woman? I'm afraid that I already have a passenger, though if we don't figure out something better I might have to bind your spirits to me for the trip. Now Sidious scowled. There was no way he would allow anyone to bind him to anything but a proper new body. I know it's less than ideal, apprentice. Do you really think I'll attempt to possess your body again? Kem isn't around. You might just get tempted or impatient enough to try your luck. Vale countered. That sounded like an interesting story. One that should have had Vale murdering his master on general principle too. What was wrong with those Sith? Did you at least get someone interesting this time? Zash inquired. Vale waved a hand, and for a long moment a look of utter concentration passed through his face. The force shifted again, and a fourth ghostly figure stood on top of the Senate, though this time it was blurry and much less tangible than either Zash or Sidious. Master T, it's always a pleasure, Sidious said reflexively. The Togruta glared in turn at each of the Sith. What would your wife say about this? Zash chided and looked mischievously at the Jedi Master. Let me worry about Bo. Vale dismissed her concern. The council was right then. Shark T hissed venomously. Vale rolled his eyes at her antics. Please, it was their obstructionism that put them near the top of my to-deal with list. Don't look at me, I wasn't going to move against the Jedi for at least a year or so. Sidious admitted. T looked at Zash, who shrugged. It's been a very long time since I gave a damn what your kind does, little girl. Vale made a dismissive gesture and Master T's image vanished. Her force signature was gone a heartbeat later. Sidious would never admit it, however the implied threat did bother him, a lot. Vale obviously wasn't bluffing about his ability to bind force ghosts. That meant Sidious had to step even more carefully than he assumed. Now, please do convince me that I should get you both new bodies when it becomes practical to do so. Vale looked expectantly at them both. I'll owe you one? Zash tried. You already do for retrieving you from Tython, my dearest master. Oh, stop beating around the bush, Belkatar. You're perfectly aware that I don't care what you do as long as I'm left alone with my research. Zash huffed. I didn't bother you nor Ashara. The same is true for your little Mandalorian bride. That's an excellent point, Vale said amiably. What about you? He focused his gaze upon Sidious. I do know where all bodies are buried. The Sith Lord's smile was back. I did set up the stage for turning the Republic into the First Galactic Empire. Contact information, deals, all we'll need to make that a reality. Sidious even allowed himself a smirk. Unless you want to deal with the Senate and the galaxy's flawed ideal of democracy. You do make a good point. Vale nodded thoughtfully. At any rate, I can't do anything about either of you before I'm back on Coruscant. The Bothans, start talking. I can use some blackmail material on them. Sidious stared at his fellow Sith. A large part of who he was wanted to deceive and set him up. That, however, would be unlikely to get Vale killed, not to mention that for some unfathomable reason Zash appeared to be fond of her former apprentice. Perhaps she liked him enough to retaliate against Sidious, which might be even fatal given his current state. As if reading his thoughts, she gave him one of those impossible, sickeningly sweet smiles. Razor-gloved hand and purple lighting danced between her fingers. Sidious could perfectly well sense the force she used, demonstrating that currently she was more dangerous than him, at least while stuck in this form. How did he get himself in this situation? The dead Sith Lord sighed and began talking. He would bid his time until ready, and then. Once Sidious was done, Vale looked at Zash. He's your responsibility, my dear. I know just what our new friend needs. Zash grinned and gave Sidious a smoky look that held all kinds of wicked promises. Vale gave her a mock salute and vanished, leaving Sidious alone with arguably the crazier ancient Sith. Part 5 =RK Ambassador Quarters, Mandalorian Embassy, Coruscant. Thanks to Zash and Sidious acting as beacons, projecting my consciousness to Coruscant was not only possible but viable without exhausting myself more than I could afford to. After our little chat, I had just enough energy left for a brief visit to my wife. It helped that Obi-Wan was near her too, thus could briefly act as an anchor for the technique. I found the three of them, My wife, Kenobi and Satine, lounging on comfortable-looking couches in a tastefully furnished room. The Kenobis were to the left, hugging each other tightly. They looked positively cute too, something that I would never admit. I had a reputation to uphold after all. Bo. She was sprawled on the second couch in the room. My wife looked and felt exhausted. Her presence in the force was less tangible than I remembered. It was hard to scan her properly through the projection, but if I had to guess, she had at least some artificial implants keeping her together after what Windu did to her. The mere thought infuriated me, and that was enough for Obi-Wan's head to snap in my direction. He gently pushed Satine and was on his feet in an eye blink. I come in peace. I smirked and forced more power into the projection, making it visible for everyone in the room. Delkatar? Bo perked up when she heard my voice. She tried to get up but winced and grabbed her side. How are you here? Kenobi demanded. He had his lightsaber in hand but hadn't ignited it yet. The former Jedi undoubtedly could feel my Force signature, which would be enough to convince him that I wasn't just a hologram made by someone with particularly bad taste and suicidal tendencies. I'm a Sith Lord. I deadpanned. I did learn a few tricks on Korriban, you know. I returned my attention to Bo. My wife managed to get herself sitting, however didn't attempt to get up. I could perceive her pain and it was infuriating. I walked through the table between the couches and knelt to look Bo in the eyes. Hey! I had to force even more energy in the projection to make my fingers somewhat tangible as I brushed her cheek. It was just enough to get a vague idea of Bo's health, and there were a lot of foreign material in her body. I ignored my rising fury and smiled. It's good to see you're alive. My smile darkened. And mostly intact. It will take more than a Jedi to put me down. Bo grinned back, yet it was more bravado than conviction I could see in her eyes. And enough seething anger to make any Sith proud. You don't call, you don't write. She pouted cutely. You go around having all the fun while I'm stuck here. Fun? What exactly did you hear of me lately? I asked. I was genuinely curious about that. After the Sis offensive that cut the Republic apart and at least parts of the intelligence community supporting the Jedi cope, it was anyone's guess what the people on Coruscant knew of the events in the Rim. Some very interesting rumors that if true mean you owe me for hogging all the fun. Bo tried to touch my hand, however her fingers merely passed through the projection. I did get the message. I married a Mandalorian bride after all. While Ashara wasn't thrilled or eager to get in trouble along with me, Bo. She would love every moment of it. That would make for an interesting change once I was back to Coruscant. Disturbing actually. That came from Satine. Did you really had to destroy so many moons? She snapped at me. It was expedient. My answer made both the Kenobis groan. I can't keep this for much longer. The only reason I managed is Zash. Did you get briefed about her by either Yoda or Palpatine? I turned to look at Obi-Wan. I'm beginning to think that whatever I was told wasn't the whole story. Talk. Darth Zash, one of my former masters. Dark Lord of the Sith and former Dark Council member. She's interested in research, experiments that sometimes are entirely above board too. I nodded at Bo. Retrieved her from Tython along with intelligence about the old Republic remnant. Palpatine and Yoda agreed she wasn't a threat to the Republic and got her a job with our R&D people. Yoda tried to assassinate her during the coup and managed to pretty much cripple her. Right now she's being held incognito at the Project Ascension site where Solemn is experimenting on her to unlock the secrets of the Force. I'll appreciate if you retrieve her, arrange proper medical treatment and clean up the good doctor's mess. Obi-Wan groaned and fell back on the couch next to his wife. Is there anything you, Palpatine or Yoda conveniently forgot to tell me before you all went insane? He snapped. Nothing important comes to mind. I'll try to get back to the core ASAP. At the moment I'm with a fleet close to Bothoi and will try to fight my way there soon. I'll appreciate if you do call our furry friends and instruct them to cooperate. And my time's up. I turned to my wife and gave her my best smile. I love you, Bo. Try to keep out of too much trouble, please. The drain became too much and I let the connection snap. RK equals. While my consciousness floated back to my body through the force, I found myself within my mind, face to face with a furious shark T. Another rant time? I glared at her and she glowered right back. You really knew about Sidious from the very beginning, T snapped. You could have ended this war months ago. Saved trillions. Her fury was magnificent, like the best of wines. Perhaps, I sighed. You've seen my memories, yet you don't understand. Jedi. Bloody, pig-headed Jedi. Or is it that you don't want to understand, T? What is to understand? You chose to be a monster. There is no understanding such madness. Did her eyes flash yellow just now? An amused smile stretched my face. Are you sure about that, my dear? I walked towards her. You know, here and now, we're closer than I've been with either of my wives. You know my past, my heart and my mind. I know your insanity and I reject it. T took her anger under control and spoke in an almost peaceful voice. Almost but not quite. There were still smoldering embers below the surface of her false peaceful exterior. In response I called the dark side and focused on it until we were both surrounded by her cold embrace. I let my fury at Windu blaze within my heart like a burning furnace. Did you experience the emotions that came with all of my memories or just some of them, Master T? I asked a question I should have gone for much earlier. I guess not, I continued. The answer was obvious after all. Even now, you feel the dark side, yet don't understand. I took another step forward until we were close enough to touch. You don't want to understand. There is nothing to understand. Her tone was almost serene, bland and inhuman. In other words, what I would expect from a typical Jedi high on the Council's dogma. You might have murdered me. You might have bound my very soul, however you will not make me fall, Vale. T glared defiantly at me for a few heartbeats before she retook control of her emotions. Fall. I chuckled. I never wanted you to fall, my dear. All I ever wanted from you was understanding. Another lie. Came the dispassionate response. Why did I even bother? Jedi, I sighed. Well, I was stuck here with her until my consciousness was back to my body, which could take a few minutes. Just let go and feel, I whispered. The dark side is everywhere. She is infinitely patient. I allowed Shark T to experience a glimpse of what I felt for Ashara and Bo. She is generous too, I chuckled when the Jedi recoiled from the love I could felt. Then I made her feel the fury burning in my heart. T's eyes widened and she took a step back. Her irises glowed yellow before I pulled back my rage. Once I told you that the dark side's greatest gift was that she could hide us from ourselves, from our greatest fears, disappointments and regrets. You lied. The Jedi accused. I did. I nodded. The best part of her first gift is that she protects us from the truth of others, from what we dare not know about their hearts. Another lie. Is it? It depends on your point of view, I continued. The second gift? It's nothing more than a proof that the Council was right to abhor attachments. It's yet another lie. You protest too much, I recon. I have no need of the dark side's illusions. There are times when those comforting illusions are all we have left to keep us sane, T. Our dreams, the gentle embrace of those who love us. I thought about the women I loved, about some precious moments we shared, and the good Jedi Master flinched as struck by the mere echo of those emotions. But that was not all. I thought of the beautiful annihilation, of the freedom and sense of power I found while reveling in war, in the search of worthy opponents. Just an illusion. A sweet lie you tell yourself to sleep better at night, T spat. There is nothing beautiful or good about war. Only misery and suffering. Keep telling yourself that, my dear Master T. My smile became vicious. The greatest of illusions is the one you Jedi tell yourselves every day, because it brings you comfort, it proves that your path is the right one. That is no illusion. There is always light in the darkest of times. Even the longest night eventually shatters in front of the light. She spoke with such endearing conviction, but I wondered who she tried to convince. Me, or herself? Jedi. The day, your precious light, there temporarily. There the illusion. This very universe began in darkness and it will end within its cold embrace. Just as the days are defined by the warm light of the sun, just as the stars are defined by the infinite blackness of space they illuminate, the dark side embraces the light, Shark T. It brings it forth from its depths, from its very center. And with each victory of the light, it is the dark side that wins, T whispered what she saw in my memories. I don't believe that. It is another illusion, another lie. Generous. Gentle. The dark side is no such thing. It seeds cruelty with injustice. It perverts compassion into contempt. She glared at me. It poisons love with seeds of doubt and hatred. Yet you follow it like a lost puppy. Was that happen to you? Did you allow yourself to feel something for me just to have those emotions twisted by the poisoned words of the Jedi Council? This wasn't what I expected. The way T averted her eyes, the pain and betrayal that flared from her heart, those were answers enough. I see now. Another sigh escaped my lips. The dark side is patient. We both know it. All it takes is the slightest bit of rain for those seeds of doubt to sprout. I looked at T and waited. She raised her head and stared at me with eyes ringed by angry orange glow. Getting poetic now? She sneered. Of course my doubts grew. The smallest of attachments are a poisoned fruit. If you falter just once, the dark side will ruin you, as it ruined you along with the rest of the Jedi. T, the dark side always wins. She is everywhere, she is always with us. She is in the heaters that keep away the cold, she is within your favorite cup of drink, under the plate with the dish you enjoy the most. I stared at her eyes as the orange glow spread and slowly, oh so slowly poisoned the yellow. She is under your chair and the table, under your bed and the soft covers that keep you warm. Even at the height of day, she is still with you under the soles of your feet, under your very skin. The brightest light casts the brightest shadows, T whispered. 1,000 years of peace. An unprecedented age of prosperity. The height of civilization. And all of that gave birth to Darth Sidious and his henchman Dooku. You know the future that would have, should have been from my memories. The chosen one, the one meant to save the galaxy. I trailed off. An ugly snarl twisted her face. That's what attachments lead to. If it wasn't for Skywalker breaking the code, if it wasn't for him falling in love and fathering children, that future would have never happened. And if it wasn't for Veta, Ashara, and Bo, I would have gleefully watched the whole galaxy burn. I said a half-truth just before my consciousness got back to my body and I awoke within my quarters on my current flagship. RK equals. Part 6. RK equals. Officer quarters. Republic cruiser shining light. Dark space. I snapped back into my body and was glad that I initiated the projection from a lying position on my bed. Otherwise, I would have ended face first on the deck and potentially broken something. The first thing I did after testing to see if everything in my body worked properly was to check the time. There were about 3 hours before our next dash into Kothles to contact the Bothans. With a bit of luck, by then they would have either made up their minds or Obi-Wan would have done it for them. Anyway, I had a few hours to kill and a job to do in that time. I felt like I made some progress with Shark T. While she did end up in my head due to an unforeseen accident that I didn't know if I could replicate even if my life was on the line, her presence was very useful on multiple levels. The obvious one was that through her I could channel more power than my body could ordinarily handle, which meant either longer use of my various Force abilities. Or even better, given the state of the Force in the future, I could actually replicate some feats that in this age would end up killing me due to the strain of channeling so much power. Which was yet another reason to hope that either Zash lived or find the time for some in-depth research in what the hell was wrong with the Force itself. I took a calming breath and began to center myself. There were other reasons why T's presence was useful. Under the right circumstances, I should be able to sacrifice her Force ghost to basically resurrect myself after dying as long as my body was somewhat intact. Finally, and potentially most useful, if I could persuade her to see things my way, I could gain a valuable ally who, thanks to seeing my memories, had the knowledge of both the Jedi and Sith from my time. Giving her a proper body could make her one of the most powerful beings in existence, something that would be invaluable either against the Ora and their Cis allies or later against the Vong. Soon, I was back within the depths of my mind, facing Shark T's ghost. She had calmed somewhat, yet the moment she laid her eyes on me, she glowered murderously. You could have watched the galaxy burn and laughed if things had turned somewhat differently, couldn't you? T shook her head in disgust. True enough. I thought for a moment and recalled a memory. A tall, imposing figure that burst with the power of the dark side materialized between us. A pair of seething orange eyes glared from under his hooded cloak. The Empire is war made manifest. Darth Mulga's voice thundered in my mindscape. That makes it perfect. Beings die in war, and that is a price we gladly pay. I waved a hand and the memory froze. Look at him. I pointed. This was mere memory of a man millennia since dead, yet. Here, in my mind, the Force made my memory as real as it gets. We both could feel the impossibly oppressive weight of the dark side emanating from him. He was power made manifest. The likes of him. Revan, the Emperor, I could count them on the fingers of a single hand. You fought this and survived. Shark T whispered. I knew what she saw when she dared to look deeply in that memory, not that she actually experienced it instead of simply watching. Mulgus at his best. Or worst, he was a dark star in the heart of the Force, a singularity gluttoning itself on all that wasn't the dark side. Not alone, I chuckled and allowed the memory to continue. I serve the Force. Mulgus' voice thundered. The Force is conflict, the Empire is conflict, and I serve them both. I called another memory of him. The Jedi understand the Force only partially. Some are even powerful in it, yet they fail to understand its fundamental nature, that it is conflict. The very existence of the light and dark side is a proof of this fact. What is this meant to prove? T continued to be antagonistic. Emotions, passion, they're as much power as knowledge is. We Sith know this. You know this. You've seen all my memories and experienced some. I allowed myself to smile. For all the truth in Mulgus' words, he was wrong. The Empire might have been in conflict, it might have been the clearest expression of what means to be a Sith, especially a Sith warrior, yet. I looked her in the eyes. Conflict defines you. Yet it doesn't have to be a war. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, they shone with soft amber light. Conflict is always with you. A constant companion, a never-ending struggle against the dark side. Correct. You Jedi never understood this. Never understood us. While the Empire wasn't, it is an expression of the Sith, it is contradiction of sorts. We crave freedom, yet strive to impose order over the galaxy. We want to be able to do whatever we want, yet the moment we built an empire, the higher in the ranks we get, greater the restrictions upon us become. I smirked. We forever seek a balance we can live with. The Jedi, on the other hand. Your kind has ever used the Force to repress yourselves and others, to enforce your version of tolerance and harmony. To be blunt, the great majority of Jedi are fools. Your disastrous little coup proved this. Those who survived will evolve. They will gain a deeper understanding of the Force and will find a way to stop you. Shark T denied my words. They will restore the order to what it should be. I laughed at her naivete while at the same time couldn't help it but respect the strength of her convictions. You've foreseen it, yet you deny what is in front of your eyes, Shark T. The Jedi who survive this conflict will evolve, true. Their understanding of the Force will deepen. And what do you think they would figure out? The order failed, you, T. Your teachings betrayed you. Your republic is on its knees. If, when we stab it, it will die. The golden age of peace is over. This is an age of war now, of warriors, not of peace and bureaucrats. The surviving Jedi will have to become warriors or die. And when that happens, the Sith would have won, completely. The Sith, but not you? Sidious wanted your kind exterminated. He all but succeeded. Me on the other hand? I need you on my side, Shark T. I need the Jedi as warriors and soldiers. As allies. If that happens, they will no longer be Jedi. The amber in her eyes grew brighter, its color deepened and bled into darker orange. Peace, T whispered. Is a lie. There is always conflict. It drives us forward. It makes us evolve and challenge our limits. You won't make peace with the Jedi. Not really. Shark T sighed in resignation. They will evolve and change or die. I smiled softly and spoke in a gentle voice. You could be the first of a new breed of Jedi. One who is in tune with the Force instead struggling to suppress it along with your own nature. And what are you, then, Darth Vader? The last and the first of a new breed of Sith. I've been where you are now. You've seen Barras and me. The choice he offered me. The chance I took. You really don't want me to fall, do you? You've seen what happens when I turn Jedi. It isn't pretty and it will be such a waste if I did it to you. I offered her my hand. Her orange eyes bored in my own, which shone with the power of the dark side too. Peace, it is a lie. Shark T finally admitted it to herself and I felt her heart break with that revelation. Yet our passions should not control us. We are the masters of our own destiny. Just go, T sighed and pulled back, deeper in the recesses of my mind. Finally, progress. I chuckled and pulled out of the meditative trance that allowed us to meet.